Konnichiwa, minasan. We are back for another episode of album discussions today, which today is sure to be a good one. In fact, this will actually be the last episode for a while until the rest of the releases, which are planned to be released, are fully distributed and out there. Kind of makes sense to wait until they're actually released. That way, I'm not giving spoiler alerts ahead of the fact. There will actually be 3 more albums at least to be released this year, if not more, because there's the one coming up at the end of the month, which is Parallel Reality 2. There is the album dedicated to Hitomi Shimatani, which will drop on her birthday, September 4th. And then there is also the 5th S.O.S. Brigade Quartet album, which will drop in November. Now, in the meantime, I am working on a new album as well called A Point to Prove. I don't think I'm going to be able to get it done by October. I was discussing with the S.O.S. Brigade possibly making another album. I don't know that I would get that done by then either. But if anything, October might be the only month where an album did get released this year so far. If I do get A Point to Prove, the new album dropped by December at the latest, hopefully. I'm hoping for. I might not even rush it with that one and might wait till next year. I mean, we've dropped 10 albums in 12 months practically, so that's quite prolific in itself. And as an accomplishment as an artist, not many artists have fully done that. So I'm pretty proud overall with, doing things that way. And we're just going to, take our time with everything, see how the new developments are going to go down as far as newer music that isn't already recorded, mixed, and mastered and set to be released. But the way Boku mo Aishiteru yo, my new single, which will be the first song recorded for A Point to Prove, is almost at 3,000 views now. It keeps climbing. Thanks everybody for the support. It's definitely the biggest hit of my career. And of course, I made it for the lovely Hitomi Shimatani, which comes straight from the heart because I love her most. And yeah, without further delay, we will now get into the discussion of the 4th album, which is titled Music and Life Lessons by the S.O.S. Brigade, Volume 4. So it starts off with a stride musical piece, another one I composed, which is sort of like the upbeat, happy quality of feeling like you're in love, like you found the girl that's your type, the one you want to be with, the one who makes you happy, the kind of girl you generally go for that you like being with. That's what my type of ladies kind of got, the musical vibe. And of course, it's a stride piano piece composed by myself. It starts off the record. And as I said, with all the S.O.S. Brigade albums, other than the debut, which was co-produced by Tone Jones, David Waddell, and Andrew of Smoke Signal Productions, the other 4 were all completely mixed, mastered, and arranged by myself. I also did vocals, sax, organ, vibraphone, and other instruments. We also had vocals from our bassist and our guitarist, our bassist Byron and our guitarist John, and they also contributed their instrumental aspects to it. Now, with this record, I really, I always say that 2, 3, and 4 were probably my favorite of the records. This one, I could honestly say this one might be overall the favorite. I've been debating that for a while. What really is my favorite of the S.O.S. Brigade Quartet albums? For some reason, I'm going to say if this isn't number 1, it's definitely number 2. Of the top 3, it's definitely either number 1 or number 2. And I could honestly say maybe number 1. Because overall, with the musical direction and styles that we took with this record, I felt like we actually were creating some of the best, most unique recorded music, I should say, on this record. Because it just branches out in so many different new creative styles and sounds that we had never attempted as a band, which makes it a lot more unique. than previous records. I mean, you have My Type of Lady starting off the record, which isn't too out of the box. I've done solo stride pieces before on the record, but then you get into the track You Can't Define Us, which mixes punk rock with jazz, and it's really cool because there's vibraphone solos, which I use the keyboard to duplicate the sound effect of that to play it, and then I played the sax solo on that too. And to mix jazz with punk rock was sort of an unheard of concept, but I really liked the idea of trying something new like that. And as I'm sure you could guess, especially with the new single being Japanese pop, punk rock, and jazz mixed together, that was sort of the origin point of where I was taking this new single. Like, this is where it roots from. Like, the idea of experimenting with these sounds stemmed from this track originally. And I would also say it took influence from Sakura Green Tea later on this record, because that was like the first time I attempted to make like purely a Japanese pop song. Now, I sang in English for parts of that, but overall there was a good amount of Japanese, and it was the first time really attempting to make a song with that vibe and quality of musical characteristics. So yeah, You Can't Define Us. I really like it because it's basically, as the chorus summarizes too, you can't define us to any genre. We're like some characters right out of a manga, a little jazz, J-pop, punk rock, and hip hop, plus soul, reggae, blues, funk, and it don't stop. Like, you can't lump us into one category because we start off as jazz, but then we mix all this other stuff, and to the point it has its own new unique and experimental sound. And it's really got like a Judas Priest meets Sex Pistols kind of vibe, which I really like. And then you have like the jazzy addition to it, which adds a whole new element and dimension to the musical sound and the idea behind the song, which I really like that we did about this song. Plus, it's sort of like a catchy anthem to explain why the band sounds so wild and experimental and doesn't sound like anything the audience has probably heard before, which is kind of cool. And then we get into our first crack at a bebop type piece, really fast, wild playing, some like Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie kind of songs. And Three Birds was the first one where we did that. And it's funny because the next song on the record is kind of reggae-ish. And Bob Marley had a song called Three Little Birds. So it's interesting. But where the idea of three birds came from is we are each playing really fast, wild, and crazy. And Charlie Parker, who like was the creator of bebop, he was called Bird. So we were identifying ourselves as being like Bird, like three different unique birds playing our own wild, fast styles. And I am really proud of that because I'll put it this way, it really was growth as an artist and expansion with our sound, but also it was really a challenge. We had to push ourselves. Not only as a saxophonist was I pushed to really play something a lot more difficult than I was used to, because bebop is really fast, challenging music. And it's tough to play that on a saxophone, especially when you have a plastic mouthpiece. That's why all the greats and professionals have metal mouthpieces. So it was a challenge to practice the hell out of that, to be able to play it fast and play it good. Now, John did phenomenal on this, and so did Byron, because they both got into the spirit of just playing really rapid, like fast styles with their instruments as well. And that's why we have the idea of it's like Charlie Parker Bird bebop music. And there's three of us, so three birds, right? And that's where the idea behind that came about. And then, as I mentioned, like the irony of like Three Little Birds being a Bob Marley song, which is a reggae song. And then the next song is kind of a more reggae-ish kind of sounding song called Getting High Every Day. Now, this is back when I was smoking marijuana every day. I don't anymore. But I was at that point pretty much getting high every day. So it related to the idea of it. And plus, they do too, right? So we were getting high every day. We could relate to this song. So I sang like the main part of the chorus, and then the getting high, getting high, getting high, getting high, getting high, getting high every day. That was like them backing up. They did backup vocals on that song, so they contributed vocals on that song too because they could relate to that idea, right? I always, with songs that like were about us as a group, or it was a message that could relate to a certain member or something, I always tried to get them to do vocals on that too, to show that it's not just me, it's our band, you know. And that's why I like the S.O.S. Brigade records, because it's jazz, it's unique. We really branched out into a whole another genre, and then we mix in all these other genres, which makes it this wild experimental sound. But overall, it's a lot more fun and unique and creative when you have a bunch of people working on something together, which is really cool, because then it really makes it so it's not your own musical project, it's our musical project, which I'm very proud of, because we made some really wild, unique, and creative music, right? So yeah, that's what was cool about that track, Getting High Every Day, is it really branches back out into the reggae vibe, which we had done a bit of on the album previously, In Search of Harmonic Discoveries, but this really had a really mellow, light vibe. And then we get into more of just a traditional jazz standard instrumental piece, which I composed, called Monday Madness, which was really well done. I like the melody of that because it's very smooth, relaxing, calming, and it's just overall a really good, feel good kind of music piece. Now, what I also like about Monday Madness um, is that it's almost like a stride piece, but there's also drums and other instruments adding to it, which makes it even more melodically intense in sound, which is really cool about that. So it's sort of like the album is building and constantly getting crazier. And then after Monday Madness, we get into the Japanese pop song, which was my first attempt of experimenting at actually just singing Japanese pop. Now, there is a good amount of English lyrics. There's also quite a bit of Japanese lyrics, but the overall melody, the quality, the structure of the song really would be jazz mixed with Japanese pop. And even we did a music video for this one, which was the first actual music video of any of the S.O.S. Brigade Quartet songs. Now, because this was more of a solo track that I did on my own that got thrown into sort of the compilation of this record, I did the music video by myself. But the cool thing about it was I shot a good chunk of it in my room, whereas the beginning and ending of the music video are actually footage from Japan. So it's kind of like Japan coming full circle with the style and the idea behind it being a Japanese pop song. And by the way, Sakura Green Tea, some people might think I'm talking about Cardcaptor Sakura, which in a way, I guess, yeah, I'm always referencing that. But in this case, no, there actually is this very delicious tea from Japan. I have a hard time getting it here and finding it in Canada now. But when I could, I used to love drinking it. And it was called Sakura green tea. It's delicious. And it's got like this beautiful smell. It's made with like the cherry blossoms of the sakura trees. And it's just wonderful. It's my favorite tea. I wish I could drink some now. I'm actually craving it just talking about it because it's so wonderful. It smells so good. It's got such a nice flavor. You don't even really need to add sugar to it. You could drink it plain and it would be good because just the smell, the natural quality of the tea, it's beautiful. It's wonderful. And it was the idea of relating that to a woman. Like, you're my Sakura green tea because you're sweet, you smell good. You're right out of Japan. You're the woman of my dreams. You're a queen. You're my favorite thing to enjoy. So relating that to the idea of Sakura green tea, you're my Sakura green tea, right? And then it could also look at it as I've always looked at myself as being similar to Shaoran. So I could say, oh, well, she's my Sakura. And then, of course, I got to drink it all up. So it's green tea. And green tea, or ocha des, very good. Totemo o ishi. And then from after that, we get into Byron no Kusuri, which basically translates to Byron's medicine. Now, I got the idea of this partly from a Taeko Onuki song called Kusuri Otaku-san, which means like a lot of medicine or an overdose of medicine. But obviously with Byron and me, we were joking around that chronic was like medicine, smoking weed was, right? And I said, yeah, you got your medicine, man. You're just chilling. You're hitting your poppers. You're smoking your joints. It's like that's your medicine, man. Byron no kusuri. So Byron's medicine. I was like, wouldn't it be cool? We just randomly gave you like a track where you lead the track, but then we put the original title in Japanese. And he's like, yeah, man, that'd be sick. He was with it, right? So that became Byron no kusuri, which is more of a solo of his where I'm just kind of backing him up with certain instrumentation. And he does vocals on that too, where he's like, yeah, I got my medicine, my chronic medicine. And it's really funny, right? So that became his sort of solo contribution to this record, which made it very good. And then after that, we get into a more unique song, which is called Namekian Wisdom. It's more of a hip hop piece, but the idea of that came about because I always looked at it as I feel like I come from another world. I'm very unique. I'm like from another planet. And I always like the idea of the Namekians in Dragon Ball Z who live on Namek and they have the original creation of the Dragon Balls, right? So I always looked at it as, oh, they're very wise. And since part of my rapper name comes from the idea of Namekian, Super Kami Guru, comes from the idea of the Grand Elder Guru in the abridged version of Dragon Ball Z. Like that was the idea. Oh yeah, I got mad Namekian wisdom because Guru means somebody who's very wise, a master at what they do, right? So yeah, Super Kami Guru Alucard definitely has the Namekian wisdom. And that's where the idea of that came about. And then if you're not into me, then I'm not into you. That's an interesting, more jazzy type piece, which I honestly came about with the idea from because nobody wants to be rejected, right? But I have a lot of pride too, and especially back when I was recording this, I always tried to look at it as, you know what? If they don't want me, then I don't want them because it's their loss. They should have appreciated me. And that's not like I kind of look at it as maybe I was looking at it more of a conceited and egotistical standpoint when I came up with the song. But now I actually realize the deep truth of that you really should believe in yourself and have self-confidence and self-worth. Like your concept of yourself should be strong enough that, yeah, if they don't want you, then don't be into them. Don't want them because it's their loss, right? So I do see like maybe I was a little hesitant about making that song, but now I'm kind of seeing the silver lining of underlining truth that really represents the idea behind that song and just how real it is. Next, we get into a track where John rips more of a solo. I'm doing a bit of vocals where I'm like, yeah, he just plays guitar because that's what he loves doing. He doesn't contribute as many vocals. Sometimes he does backup vocals, but he mostly just loves ripping his guitar and doing his thing, right? So I was like, yeah, he just played guitar and he kills it because we were actually talking about this song, oddly enough, the other day when we were out in our backyards and he was saying it's so great how we were playing it. And at first I didn't know if I was in the right key, but later on when I was listening to it, I was like, oh no, it is the right key. It all blends good. But he was amazed by it because he said there's the one part where it seems like I'm going to stop and then I keep going. And it's like it keeps the audience on your toes. I was like, yeah, that's so cool about that. Because you're like thinking, oh, is he gonna be done? And then he comes back and then you're like, oh shit, man, how much more can he go on? And he really just takes it as far as he can with it, and that's what makes it like a wonderful solo. Like it's really John ripping it at his best, and it's really cool. Like that was one of the best guitar solo tracks. It's really bluesy. I did like the organ, the drums, the bass, and the hook or whatever, but he really handled the guitar on his own and really made it his own, which is wonderful. And then after that, we get Time to Move On, which was sort of addressing the breakup with my ex Haruna at the time and how I was kind of lonely about like losing her because we'd been together for like over 2 years at that point. And honestly, I could say it was the best relationship I'd actually had. Like I really loved being with her. She was really good to me when it was good. I was happy spending time with her and enjoying life with her more than I ever was with other people. In fact, I can honestly say that at that point in my life, that was actually the best relationship I'd ever had. And some people might be shocked to hear that because she was 47. I'm 30 now. I was 29 then when it ended. But I could honestly say the age difference didn't matter. She had such a youthful personality about her. I mean, obviously, she couldn't push herself too hard. She would get tired. And whereas I have an abundance of energy very often, it seems, I was always trying to be understanding of that she was older, but she was very mature. She was very sweet to me. She appreciated me and treated me very good when we were together before, the end when things kind of shifted out of that state. But what I could say is when we were together and we loved each other, it was definitely the happiest relationship of my life. I mean, that's why she appeared on so many albums. And I was always grateful and happy to have her support and play little parts on the records and just do what she could. And we even did karaoke parties together. So there was a lot of memories. But knowing it was kind of at the end, she wanted to break up for a while. She was just afraid to tell me. I guess it was kind of like time to move on. And that's where the idea behind that song came about. And then we get into Soulful Roots, where we're all ripping solos. And I mostly did the main instrumentation of this, the main arrangement and composition of this. Started with some organ playing and some drums. I obviously added sax to it as well. But then John and Byron ripped some awesome solos on it. And it's got some really soulful roots that just make this like really awesome as like it sounds like some Fats Waller music. That's the best way I can put it. I've talked about Fats Waller on many of the S.O.S. Brigade record albums, but that's what I love about this song because Soulful Roots really does feel like one of those Fats Waller playing the pipe organ with a band backing him, kind of instrumental pieces, and it sounds really wonderful. It's very beautiful. It really goes back to the soulful roots of jazz, like to the Fats Waller era, and it's marvelous for that reason. The next song, Authenticity, which is more of a rap song, everybody does solos on it, which made it turn out really, really sick. And it's great with this song because we all killed our solos, and we started like I was really getting into Buck 65 again because I was always a big Buck 65 fan, but I had gotten 3 of his albums, right? So I actually lent them to the group and they listened to it and they agreed. They're like, you know what? Shit, for this white guy from Canada making hip hop music, it's country rap. Yo, Buck 65, sick, man. And he had something where he was in an interview and he said authenticity was everything, that it was so important that people want you for being the real you. So the idea of that inspired the idea behind that song. And that's what I tried to do when we made the song Authenticity. And I think it turned out really good. It was really cool. It had like a West Coast G funk kind of vibe to it, but very cool. And then we do the instrumental composition, Badge of Honor. It was really good to sort of talk about that because it was sort of like the idea of Giri. We're bound by our obligation, our duty, and our honor to be true as artists, to create new things, experiment, be unique as artists, and also still give the best possible quality to the music that we could, while still trying not to copy anyone else and do something different entirely. Taking inspiration where it comes, but still trying to make it your own unique thing that nobody else has done. And that's where the idea of the melody behind Badge of Honor comes about. Now, our next song, our strange occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. The idea of that title actually comes from a short story written by the author Ambrose Bierce, who actually disappeared when he was going to Mexico to write about the Mexican-American War. And he mysteriously vanished. Nobody still to this day knows what happened to him. They actually talk about it in the second sequel of From Dusk Till Dawn, because the 2 sequels after the original actually went straight to video. They were never put in theaters, but the second sequel actually gives you like a look back in time to the Wild West days of where the titty twister is in the border of Mexico, and like from Texas and all that, they get to there. And it's interesting because it reflects the location that is in the original, but in a past previous time setting. And it's interesting how they tie the whole story of Ambrose Bierce's disappearance together with the story, because nobody still to this day knows what happened to him. So it's interesting that they suggest, oh, maybe he ended up at some place like La Tetilla del Diablo, which means like that's what the original Spanish name for the devil's nipple or the titty twister was, right? And it's interesting how they give you the idea that maybe that's where he disappeared to. He ended up in some place like that and nobody ever found him. Who knows? He could still be lurking among us, right? But that story he wrote, A Strange Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, the idea of that story too is very interesting because it's a story about a man who gets hung on a bridge, and in his imagination, he actually imagines that somehow he escaped, that the rope broke, that he dived into the river. His neck really hurt a lot. He swam up the stream of the river. He basically was getting shot at by all these different things. He eventually gets knocked out onto the shore. He manages to escape in the woods. He travels all night. He finally gets back home. And then, right as his wife's about to greet him, his neck all of a sudden starts to really hurt. And then he realizes he was just hallucinating from the loss of blood to his neck. He was actually just imagining that he escaped and made it home, but really that was the moment he died because the hanging finally had killed him. And the idea of that fascinated me. It was a short story I listened to several times because it was such a unique mystical experience for Ambrose Bierce to sort of give you that story where you actually believe the character has escaped his fate at one point until you realized it was all in his imagination and it was actually a hallucination brought on from like the strangulation and the suffocation of the rope around his neck, choking him to death. But our strange occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge was basically giving you the example of all of us being very unique, different characters. And we're making this jazz music, but also we're aware of who we really are at the same time. We are these characters. It isn't our normal thing, but here we are. We're experiencing it as if it was natural and normal to us, even though all of us in the band are unique characters that really aren't your typical jazz standard playing people. So that's the idea behind that song. That's where the concept of it came about. Next, we get into Psychological Mingus Groove and Stomp, or Psychological Mingus Stomp for short. The stomp comes from the old ideas of like the Porter Stomp, the Fat Swaller Stomp, and it's a fast, more bebop kind of style song. Like it actually reminds me of Mahogany Hall Stomp by Louis Armstrong in this case. Very fast, wild playing. But the cool thing is Byron did the intro for that too, and he's like, these artists sound like they're moving in slow motion. Let's show them some speed. And then we just rip it, right? And the cool thing with that song was too, oddly enough, that was one of the songs we had recorded right in his kitchen because his brother Rob was working at the time, so we couldn't go upstairs to do it. So we just quietly did it in the kitchen with the door closed. And we actually banged out that track pretty easily in a short amount of time right there in the kitchen. So it was cool. The next track, because that's instrumental, it leads into I Wanna Break, How Long Has This Been Going On, brackets, um, was based on the Chet Baker song, How Long Has This Been Going On? And the I Wanna Break idea was, we've been making so much music nonstop. I'm sure they got to be getting tired. I'm getting tired. We are just gangbuster in it. Like we're killing it, just rolling like gangbusters, dropping all this music all the time. Just so much of it. It's like we probably need a break. We should probably recharge our batteries because we've been going nonstop for like almost 5 albums now at that point, right? But then also I took Chet Baker's idea of the song, that idea, and then kind of added rap and turned it into a very unique sort of song to reflect me as an artist as well. So it was very cool to make that song because it was so many different ideas kind of combined into one to tell like the story of, wow, How long has this been going on? We've just been killing it nonstop so long. I forget when we started recording now. We might need a break. I kind of want a break. This is a lot of work we've been doing. And then next we get into the acoustic Louis Jordan bluesy kind of song called "Oh My Dearest Blues," which is a song I wrote about how things were ending with Haruna. I was reflecting on the idea of being inspired by people you love, and sort of like a bluesy song, like a Louis Jordan vibe with the acoustic going, and just kind of singing the song like a very traditional, almost country bluesish kind of song, right? So it was very cool to do that because it was completely a new leap, like jumping into like country bluegrass and singing it in a Louis Jordan kind of funny vibe really added a whole new dimension of sound that the audience probably wasn't expecting as they listened to the record. But I could say I actually have gotten a lot of praise for how well written that song was from my neighbor, who is actually Byron Sr., oddly enough, the bass player's father. He actually said he really liked that song. It took me a while to think of what song he was talking about until he said the acoustic one. And then I was like, oh, My Dearest Blues. That was the acoustic one he meant. And then next we get into the traditional jazzy piece, Wishing Well, which had flute, trumpet, bass, and sax solos. I did this with Byron because I think John was sleeping at the time when we did this one. So he didn't make it on this one. And then the final track of the record, the one where I was actually inspired from the idea of Anna Suchia's song Zero to make this. I think I mentioned that before, wanting to make a song like this. So I finally did. I incorporated and interpreted, excuse me, the chorus of what she sings in Zero. And we had this like very jazzy, carefree R&B reggae kind of vibe going with the melody. And we all ripping solos. I'm doing the chorus. We're jamming out. We're playing all these great instrumental solos. The chorus, like that inspiration, I'm going my way. I'm finding my love, all that, like really empowerment of selfless love. They love you not because they want anything in return, but they just love you for nothing in return, just because they love you. And that genuine love is what inspired me and motivated me. And since that was the ending of the album and that was the last track we did that day, I'm like, come on guys, we should all just say something funny at the end to make it look like, oh, okay, now we're gonna just chill and celebrate now that we got another record done, we finished the song. So we all said some things. I remember Byron said chicken wings. And I think John was just like, yeah, like we all said some funny shit. I was saying a lot of things, but we were all just joking around. And it was so funny because I think like when it came time to do it, we actually all got nervous of what we'd say. I'm the least nervous, right? The least shy. So I said the most naturally, just trying to vibe with it, right? And I think they were more confident before we started actually recording the outro. But then as soon as it came time to record, they kind of like froze up. And that's why they ended up saying such random stuff. But that's what makes it comical because it's like, yeah, shit. What should we do now that we're done the record? We're done the song. Celebrate. Chicken wings. Yeah. All this stuff, right? So it's very funny because it actually was real. It's, as they say, like art imitating real life and real life imitating art. And that's what made, like, this album really was cool because it was an expansion of sound in so many different ways of like really going to new heights of musical diversity and experimenting with song ideas and sounds that we had never actually dared attempt as a group before, or even me as a solo artist. So I could honestly say that was like that was probably my favorite record of the S.O.S. Brigade Quartet. And I really just like that we incorporated so many different ideas and songs and genres into the songs of what we did. Now, overall, to summarize, since we're getting near the end of our broadcast, I would say that record was a lot of fun to make. Like, we had a lot of really good times making that record. We laughed, we were cracking jokes. The songs turned out really good. We were having fun. As the one song suggested, we were getting high and drinking beers all the time. Like, it was just a party. In fact, what I could say, making all the S.O.S. Brigade Quartet albums, especially because until the fifth one gets released, we won't do album discussions for a while. But I can say that while we made these 5 albums, every day was like a party, a non-stop party. And we were just having a ball. We were coming up with these crazy, wild songs unlike anything the world had ever heard before. And it was just a blast. I really enjoyed those times. And I give credit and praise to John and Byron both, because as this journey began, as we made all these records, they kept getting better with their instruments. I mean, the more you work at something, the more you naturally start to get better. That's why we had actually reached the level of being able to play bebop, because we were constantly recording, we were constantly playing all the time, and we just kept getting better and better. I became better as a saxophone player. I became better as a songwriter. I became better as a singer as a result of making all these records nonstop, working round the clock with the S.O.S. Brigade. So I'm really grateful and happy for all those times together. And who knows, maybe we will end up making that 6th album, the S.O.S. Brigade Quartet Sings the Blues. It is yet to be decided, but we will see. And if that happens one day, well, then I hope we can bring you all another funny, wonderful, experimental, and unique album as a group, because we already did so much great work in this time. Gotta stick with it. Anyways, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed all of these album discussions. And once more of the albums that are set to be released are released, we will come back and review the other albums as well. Domo arigato gozaimasu, minasan. Have a wonderful day. Super Kami Guru Alucard. Peace out. Matane.